You are now tuned into the Money Level Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show, where we think, act, and prosper. And this is the man himself, Andy Schectman of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. How you doing today?
I'm all right, man. Thanks for having me back.
So when we talk about thinking, acting, and prospering, what are some things that people should be thinking about right now in terms of how to protect their capital, how to protect their wealth, and things of that nature?
Well, to me, the first thing I would say is pay yourself first. We all have a bad habit of letting the laws of compounding work against us rather than for us. And one of the things I learned as a very young man when I started this company 34 years ago, a promise to my father that I would buy something every 2 weeks. And you don't have to buy gold and silver every 2 weeks, but the idea is to prioritize your future self. You know, if you're talking to your future self today, sitting down next to him and he's 30, 40 years older than you, you'd say, listen, man, put some money aside for us because it's expensive now. Mm-hmm. And it was the greatest gift my dad ever gave me, telling me to prioritize myself first, to pay myself first. And every 2 weeks for going on 34 years, I have honored that promise to my father. And it is the best gift he ever gave me. And I understand the laws of compounding. Mm-hmm. So in a world where it's easy to skip here and again, anything you want to be good at, exercise, relationships, dieting, you got to be regimented, you have to be dedicated. The same thing should be true about your finance. I think right now, in addition to paying yourself first, to understand prioritizing savings, I think it's very important to be a contrarian, maybe more so now than ever. And I think if, as Rick would say, if you're not a contrarian, you're bound to be a victim, in the respect that we see stock market as an example that is wickedly being held up with very little breadth. It's being held up by 3 or 4 stocks, markets that are near all-time highs, with the majority of the stocks underneath it, like the Russell 2000, underwater, which is a better indication of the economy at large. You have 3 or 4 massive stocks that are weighted so heavily holding up the markets. We can look at treasuries, which, if I had to guess, interest rates ultimately go much higher. Now, I'm not talking about the short-term rates and the lowering of the short-term rates by a quarter basis point or whatever. I'm talking the long-term rates. What I'm really getting at is that when you think of interest rates, think of real estate, when you think of equities, these traditional forms of investing, over the last several years, because of all of the money that's been pumped into the system and the suppression of interest rates, it's created distortions and misallocations of capital and resources. And I think the markets in general are massively overvalued. There's tremendous uncertainty. So I find that, for me, precious metals offer safety, if you will, from the madness that we see in monetary policy and the irresponsibility we see in fiscal policy. For me, it would be buying silver, which is probably the most undervalued asset on the planet. And if I'm going to do anything mainstream whatsoever, anything, I'm buying short-term treasuries of 6 months of duration or less. And honestly, I don't know where else to put your money now. Mm-hmm. And I try to be objective. I try and think, where would I put my money if someone gave me a $20 million bill? I don't know, other than silver, gold, and incredibly short-term interest rates, because the reality is that I believe we are on the cusp of some very interesting times with BRICS, with de-dollarization, and the ramifications of that. So I know that's a lot to swallow, but what I'm really getting at is that I think it's time to be unconventional in the way that you look at the world and the way that you invest. Unconventional times call for unconventional decisions and ideology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of great points. Many of us have been conditioned, to, think that the economy is stable, think that, the stock market is always going to go up, to think that, just put your money in a 401k and you're going to do good and you're going to retire. And there's a lot of studies around people don't even have enough money to retire and they're far behind. And so when we're looking at government debt, deficits, unfunded liabilities, and everything, what role do you see gold playing with the future of America and the dollar with all of these headwinds it looks like we have coming up?
That's very smart and good question. I mean, yeah, you talk about the debt. We're adding $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. It took 200 years to do it the first time. That's $100,000 a second that we are adding. 100,000 per second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have a nearly $35 trillion debt and almost $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. $99 trillion in Medicare Part B, $22 trillion in Medicare Part D, the prescriptions, $77 trillion in Social Security, government and military pensions, and the like. We are broke, we are insolvent. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. The world sees this. We are irresponsible in our addiction to spending and our horrendous monetary policy. And really the death knell, I think, to the entire system is the weaponization of the dollar. And I'm actually tired of people calling it that, myself included. We outright stole $5 billion worth of treasuries from the Russians. Stole it. That's the default. And it's bad enough to do that, but then to give $5 billion in aid much in the form of military weapons to the Ukraine, the country that they're fighting a war against, whom we stole it from, is a line you don't come back from. And what we are seeing is much of the world push back against this. At the same time, we look at gold, which in the respect of treasuries which are being sold because of this threat of sanctioning and confiscation, this hypocritical stance where Janet Yellen can threaten China, their banks, their companies, and Beijing itself for aiding Russia. Doesn't matter that we've given $260 billion to the Ukraine. We've bought Stinger missiles for them and F-16s and the intelligence on where to fire this stuff because we don't count. But they do, evidently. And so the world is selling treasuries, and China, Japan, Saudi, Russia, they're all dumping treasuries. China was at $3 trillion, they're just over $700 billion, and instead they're buying gold. Why? Well, number one, gold was reclassified the world's only other tier one asset next to U.S. treasuries in dollars. That was in 2019. And who's buying it at levels the world has never seen? The central banks. So they're selling treasuries and buying gold. And the other reason is that you go back 25 years to 2000, and the gold price has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury, but doesn't have counterparty risk. No liability, no sanctions. The BRICS just came out just a few weeks ago. The head of the BRICS New Development Bank, Dilma Rousseff, she used to be the president of Brazil, and said, in principle, we have agreed to a new settlement currency called the unit, which will be 40% gold and 60% basket of currencies of the BRICS Plus nations, and will be traded over Project M-Bridge. Project M-Bridge I've been talking about for a year and a half. It is a cross-border payment system that was developed by China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. It allows countries to trade each other central bank digital currencies without using the SWIFT. The dollar is not compatible with Project M-Bridge. Saudi Arabia just became a full participant in Project M-Bridge. Dilma Rousseff said we will use Project M-Bridge and trade the unit currency. That is in principle what we've agreed to. They have agreed to a meeting in September in China to ratify this and then potentially announce it at the big BRICS meeting in October. The ramifications of this is extraordinary. Number one, each country will be able to maintain their monetary autonomy by trading their own central bank digital currencies over M-Bridge. There doesn't have to be one common settlement currency. It will be, for the BRICS, it will be a token that is backed by gold and backed by these currencies that will be used for settlement. Instead of having a BRICS currency, it will be a common settlement currency that each will possess while still having the ability to have their own central bank digital currencies and their own monetary autonomy. It gets rid of the need for one common BRICS currency. It's a common settlement currency. But if you realize that gold is 40% of this common settlement currency, which will be redeemable in kilobars by the nations who issue them, what it really means is that instead of putting the reserves into treasuries, which was part of the petro deal, we sell oil in dollars and put the reserves in treasuries, the excess. Now they'll put it in gold, which is the only other tier one asset, which has no counterparty liability and which has doubled the performance of the Treasury over the last 25 years, and it just eclipsed the performance of the Treasury over the last 50 years. So what you have is an asset that is less volatile than the Treasury market. For the first time in 45 years last year, has outperformed it and cannot be weaponized or sanctioned against. In fact, Project Enbridge, which if you go to the BIS website, who's also behind it, Bank of International Settlements, who also reclassified gold as Tier 1, you'll notice that it says right on there that this is a tool that will not allow for sanctions and weaponization and the unipolar aggressiveness of a country that wants to impose their will. So you have a platform that allows these countries to trade outside of SWIFT and a settlement that will be pegged to gold, which is the only other Tier 1 asset. Mm-hmm. So it will inhibit the desire to buy treasuries and increase the demand for gold, and at the same time massively decrease the demand for US dollars. One other real key point to the, sorry, I'm battling Florida allergies. I never had those when I lived in Minnesota. The other point would be that if you read the white paper on the unit, it says that the gold that is part of this new settlement currency will be held within the borders of the countries that create the unit token in a segregated account and audited with strict penalties for not maintaining the consistency of this unit program. But it means that each country will hold their own gold. And when you look at all of the countries that have been buying gold, we also see a major repatriation trend, where India, as an example, just bought 1.5 times the amount of gold in the first 4 months of this year than they did all of last year, and brought it home along with the 100 metric tons they held at the Bank of England since '91. Along with Saudi Arabia and Egypt and a half a dozen African countries just did that from the New York Fed. They're all bringing their gold home. They're accumulating it. The potential for gold is extraordinary as a result of this new common settlement currency, to which 59 more countries have just said they want to join the BRICS, along with the 10 that are already there. They'll sell treasuries, they'll buy gold, they will get rid of the need for the dollar to transact everything, they will get rid of the treasury for the need to massively to use as a reserve asset. It's the beginning of the end of the dollar. It's a fuse that has been lit, and it is something that people should research. The unit and Project Enbridge. And you walk away from reading those two white papers and you'll say, my goodness, this is not good for the dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that's pretty loaded. So I'm gonna be sure to link to those white papers and such in the description, because people should do their own due diligence, and I definitely want to.
I'll send them to you. I have them on my phone right now.
Yes, indeed. So we talked about saving in gold and such, and so what role does gold play as an insurance or hedge against any chaos that may come from these developments of central banks selling treasuries, moving away from the dollar, buying gold? Like, obviously, I think the people should be, proactive about this. So what role will gold play as
insurance? And another good question. I mean, the central banks are the most powerful people in the world. Not only are they the wealthiest, they're the most well-informed. They know where we're going. And as a result, they're always 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of the public. Gold is one of the only assets that has outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, everything the world has ever thrown at it. It's mentioned in the Bible hundreds of times. And here we are 5,000, 6,000 years later, and the most well-funded and well-informed traders in the world over the last 3 years have bought more than any time in human history, or central bank history, I should say, and at the same time repatriating it. You see, all of these countries who bought gold largely would leave them at the Bank of England and the New York Fed. The Bank of England and the New York Fed, both rule of law, safe and stable jurisdictions that would give access to the LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association, and the COMEX. Quickly traded, easily held, safe, stable, outside your borders, no worries. And now they're like, screw it, bring it home. The risk, the counterparty risk of trading with a country or storing your metal with a country that has proven to weaponize assets if we don't align ideologically, is something that I think has taken on a new significance. So gold and silver are wealth more than anything. And I think the most powerful people in the world are showing you that by their actions more than anything. So don't do as you hear, do as the biggest money in the world is doing. And I think you'll come out a lot better. This is not me saying this. Look, I'm not trying to sell gold to anyone to get wealthy. Gold is wealth. You own enough of it, you will. But there are very few things that you can leave to your children and your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, that in the year 3000 will be considered wealth, just like it was 5,000 years ago, long after the money in your wallet right now that you call currency is hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian as an example of what used to be. The dollar, as we know it, is on its way out, going to be replaced by a new system. We've squandered the trust, and the only way to get that back is to have it pegged to something that doesn't require, trust me, really, it's all good. No, I want it physically in my possession, and something that can't be weaponized, can't be sanctioned, can't be manipulated, can't be inflated, can't be distorted the way that the U.S. dollar and the U.S. Treasury market have been for all these years.
So we got to get back to real money. That's what people should be thinking about right now. Getting back to real money. None of this funny stuff, right? And,
that's exactly right.
And
it's one of the very few things that is money.
Yeah.
The bills we have is currency, and again, the biggest money in the world, the most sophisticated and well-informed money in the world is showing you that by their actions.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing that I would take away from this show, and if you pay close enough attention, you'll see that. I think it's never been more important to be a contrarian, ever. And I find that to be easily found in precious metals in your own possession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Well, Andy, thank you for coming on to the show. I know you're very active on X and other platforms. Where can people find more about you, the work you do, and some of the things that you're putting out, the information that you're putting out?
So I've just started. We've had a YouTube channel for a long time that's been dormant. We just opened it back up. I'm going to have you on the show. I've done 4,000 YouTubes on shows like yours for the past 3 years and 3.5 years. They can find us at milesfranklin.com if they're interested in any questions that they've heard on this show being answered, or a price list that we keep really close to the vest. They can send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Just request the price list if you want. You'll find it's probably as good or better than any price in North America. And appreciate coming on. We should do this more often.
Yes, indeed. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Likewise.